Welcome to the Fail Forward podcast. The purpose of this podcast is change the negative stigma around failure into a positive. Failure is only a negative if we do not learn from it and we give up. Welcome back to the Fail Forward podcast. Today I've got Jack Jiggens on board with us, and he's going to be talking about his journey and just not the linear way of his journey, all the bumps in the road. I specifically messaged Jack because he put a great post the other day on social media talking about his success in the year, but also the failures that he did to get him to that success, which instantly enticed me into wanting to speak to Jack. Jack is an entrepreneur. He owns multiple businesses, 4 businesses, I believe. So, Jack, do you want to just tell us a bit about yourself and those businesses in itself?
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks for having me on, Henry. And thanks for reaching out off the back of the post. Long story short, my name's Jack Jiggens. I grew up around Oxfordshire. I did a business degree in business and marketing at Oxford Brookes. It's a comical story. Everyone says that I've never left Oxfordshire. Off the back of my degree, I didn't feel like a marketing intern role for 24 grand a year in the city was for me. And I knew that there was definitely natural attributes for myself to be a business owner. And I think I'm very unemployable. I'm always trying to resolve problems and change how things look from the outset. And it's difficult working for someone else when you have that mindset. Not the fact that I put the hours in. So off the back of that, and over the last sort of 5 years, we've been growing a property development company called EP40, which is home counties and West London based. Our HQ is in Henley-on-Thames. We also set up, off the back of XP Property, we call it a bit of an ecosystem because all the businesses communicate and use each other and have a very centralized team that can sort of maximize that value. We then set up a surveying company about 2 years ago called XP Surveys. That's a geomatics measurement and building surveying company. So that's a service-based business, which is very different to a development company. And then 5 years ago, I also set up a management and lettings and HMO business with my brother called Central Suites. And they're the main 3 companies. XP Property also has a share in a social portfolio, which we've also been building over the last 2 years.
Wow, they're doing a lot then. That's amazing. So, you went to uni and you realised you weren't employable. So at that point, you decided to start a business. What was your driver to start a business apart from realising that? Did you have experience were your parents entrepreneurial? What drove you to get into a place where you thought, right, I'm going to go straight into business?
Yeah, so my parents are entrepreneurial. My father ran businesses from a very young age. He actually left school, couldn't read or write by about 11 years old. And he is very skilled at managing people, managing cash flow. But he's what I call that sort of generation, which I think is getting diluted down of the era of, if you were dyslexic, which I am, and my father is, and my sister is, you don't really get the time and attention and need to educate you on how you're best fit in a company or in a professional environment. So for him, I was a lot more fortunate that it was a bit more aware when I was during education. But for him, he left and just started working. Then he basically started on the tools on a building site. So you can sort of see the second generation developer coming through to me. And then he ran a building company and then a plant and tool hire company. So from a very young age, I can remember him. Well, sometimes I wouldn't see him for almost months on end, where he was doing shows, catering for his clients' needs, growing the business. My mum was a stay-at-home mum. I'm one of 3, so she had her hands full, especially because we're all quite entrepreneurial. And from that, obviously, you are a bit more ingrained to understanding the mindset of, why don't you go out there and give it a go? Why don't you take that risk? You haven't got a lot of responsibility or people relying on you at the moment. Go and take that plunge. So that was very evident from a young age. But I think I was, to some degree, born with a bit of a skill of trading. I like negotiating. A lot of people are uncomfortable negotiating. I think I set up my eBay account when I was about 14 years old. And obviously prior to that, the standard story of taking sweets to school and selling them. But that's not that exciting because it just fulfills your own snack habits at school. But my eBay account since then has traded over 500 trades. I focused on basically retail arbitrage. So taking a product that's really badly marketed with an independent business, advertising it on eBay. So I benefit from the massive eBay marketing spend, and I would buy the stock low and then sell it high on page one of Google. And I've been doing that now for, blimey, 16, 17 years and never really stopped. And that all comes part of negotiating, finding the supplier, agreeing a bulk discount. Obviously, that bulk discount is I'm preempting. I'll sell 20 units in a quarter. I agree a price, sell it via obviously eBay, then Google at a much higher price, because the consumer might be a little bit lazy to do any research and see if there's any other options out there. And as a result of that, build a nice income of trading that stock. I actually went into an office role in sales after university because I knew I could put the work in. I've always had quite a strong work ethic. That's definitely something that's filtered down from my dad, from working on building sites, labouring for family, friends, and whatever it may be at a young age. So my view when I had come out of university with my business degree, and it took me till sort of 2021, I still didn't know what I wanted to do or what that looks like. I'd already tried ventures in the fitness industry, which you could say was a failure, including a gym setting up and not actually getting off the ground personally, and then also a meal prep business. But I went into this sales role very open-minded that if I put in the most work every day out of everyone in that office, of an office of 100 to 150 people, my view is I'd get paid the most because it's commission-based. It didn't really click, and that was like a real sort of, I suppose, second check. Am I fit for business? Am I fit for something that's completely and solely reliant on my skills? The answer is no. I've learned now, being a business owner with a team that's quite a substantial team of several different skill sets, that I do need other people to grow and scale where I need to be. I heard Roger Hamilton, the billionaire that we all know, say something the other day on a conference. He said most often the most biggest bottleneck you'll have in your business is you. And I completely agree with that. So going into the sales position, I was probably too late, in my opinion, to leave, because you're always getting paid for sort of 2 or 3 months of sales ahead of where you're at. So it sort of entices you to stay there and keep working in that happy to say rat race. And just one day, it was actually the start of the new year, I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. I'd saved up quite a substantial amount of money from my stuff that I was doing on eBay, working out of hours in construction, and also working in the sales business. And I handed in my notice, and one of my directors said to me, you know, what do you want to do? And I said, I don't know what industry I want to be in, but I want to be in an ownership of a business role, because I want to basically be in their position, that I want to work on growing things and coming up with ideas and solving problems and building a team around me to create that value. So it was there and then I quit my job. As I mentioned, had a quite a substantial cash pot for someone of sort of 22, 23 years old. I wanted to invest that into a business that I could throw everything into. And while I was sort of trying to think what business I wanted to go to, I love e-commerce and product, because you can make significant, 10x, 100x, 1000x returns from quite a limited amount of work, and it's very scalable. But just to keep me busy, I went and worked back to what I knew. I went and worked on a construction site, and I was probably the most qualified hod carrier in the UK at that time. And off the back of that, a few opportunities opened up to invest in some property schemes, and that's really where my construction and property development life began, really. And I started building a business that was just me, and investing in schemes, actually delivering them on the tools. And it was very quickly that I realized that I can't really do this for another 30, 40 years, and I need to build a team, and I need to get contracts managers in, and I need to make sure that I'm not actually physically lifting blocks to create the business and the portfolio that I want to build. And that's where I met my business partner, Ben Richards, and we sort of wanted to divide and conquer. We had very similar aspirations to grow a business where we're not doing one project a year, we're doing 8 developments a year. So at that time, 22, 23, we were flipping one house at a time. But now, if you fast forward, I think we've got about 12 projects secured this year. Some of them are 24 flats, 28 flats, 14 flats, 7 offices, 7 flats. So they're a lot larger, and we're managing a lot larger stock.
Wow, love that. So hell of a journey. And just to go pick back through that, you sound like it's a bit similar, but obviously completely different to my upbringing, where my dad he did more sort of flips where we lived in properties and lived in caravans and things. But I certainly grew up around property, and then also see my dad do it like not the way that that we go taught how to do it now. You know, using other people's time and other people's money. He was doing it all himself. And it's funny because it's similar to me. I left and went and did other jobs, but I didn't go straight into property. It actually took me a lot longer than it took you to get back into property, because I'm 38 now. I got into property 2 years ago. So I was like 20 years before I got into property, because I sort of didn't want to do it because I saw my dad overworking himself. But certainly going through that journey that you did has certainly helped. Just and I first met you, Jack, and I don't know if you remember, but you did a keynote with your partner at Progressive Property. And I don't know if you know, but that day you struck a light bulb off in my head, because I knew fortunes in the follow-up. I say it to my mentees all the time on my other mastermind. And you stood on stage and went, yeah, all these deals that we've gone in for, we weren't the first bidders. Like you actually had a stat, and we was like, oh yeah, we're not following up on anything because we weren't following up on any of our deals. So did you pick that up from your sales training?
Yes, I did. Yeah. Um, I mean, there's a lot of things that we just talked about. I mean, we used to, my dad did develop every house that we lived in when we grew up. So I did live in a caravan, but back to sales and follow up. Um, I mean, topic of fail forward. I didn't feel like I was actually that good at the sales that I was doing in the day job, and I think that was partly because there's a moral aspect that I wasn't comfortable with, which was we had to inherit by the company, i.e., manipulating situations, and I hate that word, and that wouldn't even be seen in our company. I think you can do good sales with honest approach. So I really struggled in sales prior, but I took so many of the fundamentals that I was taught, and I learned so much in sales over the course of that employed job, because they were very intensively on training. The first 2 weeks, you don't even pick up a phone. You actually go through 2 weeks of sales. But the follow-up process, obviously, it's very different. So in my old role, follow-up wasn't necessarily following up on a £1 million site that we're going to convert to 14 flats. But I completely took that over from the sales experience I have, and just go through with you, because the listeners might find it useful in terms of the stats. Since 2020, we've bought a site every 4 weeks. So you can do the maths. We're talking, we're obviously late 2022 now. We're talking about 25 to 30 sites. And I actually run a stat myself, because obviously now I'm in a business ownership perspective. I still work on the acquisitions, but I have people to help me within the acquisitions, and I need to try and transfer what works for me and let them adapt their own sort of way of delivering schemes into our business. And out of those 30 schemes, let's say, we've got out 550 offers since we've set up the business, and our success rate is about 10%. So I know I need to get out 10 offers to get one deal. And knowing that fact is quite key, because you need to know your activity. But the 10% off the 10 offers is more successful from the follow-up process. So we have a more routinely process after we've bid than we do before. So what's really common in property, and it might be common in other things, is you get really excited about a project and it sort of swallows all of your time, and you focus days. I've seen some developers or acquisitions team focus weeks on one project. But what is your likelihood of securing that? What is your competitive advantage? Can you build out as cheap as anyone else? Is your finance as cheap as anyone else? All those factors mean that someone might be able to pay more and you'll miss out on it. That's fine by me, because quite often I look at it and I go, I'm going to get this 6 months' time when that buyer hasn't performed. 1 in 3 property transactions from under offer to exchange fall through. So I want to be that 33% success of that fall through, that we step in. So out of back to how many sites we've bought, which is about 30 sites, we went through and assessed every single one that we secured first time round, and it's 2 projects. So out of those 30 deals, it was the follow-up process that secured them. So what's crazy is, yeah, we do spend time on our follow-up process, and if we weren't spending time on that, we probably could have got out more offers. But I think quite frequently you're more likely to secure a deal once you just call up the agent, call up the owner, landowner, has it sold? What's the process? Why have you pulled it from the market? Has this person that outbid me performed? Can I have a go at running through legals and showing you what we could do? And that really power of follow-up has been absolutely detrimental, and by 100% a majority in our acquisitions process to secure that. And that has come from assisting and being trained in sales, I suppose.
Love that. That's like, I mean, that's so much value just in that couple of minute piece there with following up. And I know property people listen to this podcast, so it's a thing that I say all the time is fortunes in the follow up. And like I said, sometimes when something's right in front of you, like when I saw you on stage and you said that, I was like, I know this. Why am I not doing this? I do this in my other businesses, but I'm not doing this in property. But I guess that's why we go to these events. That's why we have mentors. That's why we are part of masterminds and have those kind of things to help us, because quite often things are right in front of our face and we don't even see it. So yeah, thank you for sharing that, Jack. And it's just again showing that like people go on a journey of work, and like I was in sales like you, and I did car sales, and that was the most morally corrupt business ever. They were selling overpriced cars with terrible warranties on it, with the worst finance packages, and they were literally, as you say, manipulating people who were on their dog walk to buy a car. They just popped in to have a look at a car, and before they know it, they're on a Sunday afternoon dog walk and they're driving home with this terrible valued car. So yeah, sales like that. But when you add sales as in like the value, and you look at what value you're delivering to your clients, then it works really well. And like they say, selling is serving, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I always reiterate to our team, or if I'm doing a keynote speaker, whether it's a landowner or an agent or whoever's involved in that sale transaction, normally a landowner wants good terms or good money, and the agent just wants a clean transaction so that they get their fee and they can move on to other business. And I always say they're not there to grow and build your business. It's not in their to-do list to go, right, I need to sell 10 sites to Jack this year because I need to grow XP property. Their to-do list is I need to sell 10 deals this year because that's what pays my bills. Whoever buys them, it's not really by the by. So it's our job to get on top of them and make sure that we're front of mind. We're fully informed. As soon as there's a little wobble in legals of someone else not performing, I want to be the first person to know or to find out. So I do hold that upon myself, and that's my job, to be in there at the right time. And to be there at the right time, you've got to be there all the time, because you never know when the right time is.
Yeah, definitely. I tell some of my mentees, be in the right place at the right time, but to be in the right place at the right time, you've got to be consistent, and turning up and being regular. And even there's probably some people that debate me on this, but in sales you don't need to be that talented, really. It's the people that turn up week in, week out, that just ask the questions that are consistent. They're the people that get the wins. It's not necessarily about being able to woo somebody on the end of the phone. It's just being right place, right time. As you say, how do you get there? Just turning up on a consistent basis and be making those phone calls, right?
Yeah. I will say, additional to putting the time in is also listening. It is my bugbear when sales people don't listen. You tell them a golden nugget of what needs to happen, how it needs to happen, like, oh, this is the problem, and they just keep throwing spaghetti at the wall and hope that some of it sticks. Time, consistency, and listening to what the problems are to solve them is definitely the fundamentals.
Yeah, definitely. Someone said to me the other day, you've got two ears and one mouth, so you should use them in that proportion. And I was like, yeah, I'd never even thought about that before. We have got two ears. Yes, listen more, listen more. Love that. So tell me a bit about, we briefed on it a minute ago, but a bit about your upbringing, similar to mine, in the sense that you lived in building sites. What was that like? And what was that experience? And did your dad get you pushing a wheelbarrow around and cracking on at weekends when your mates were out playing and that kind of stuff? Because that was my experience.
Yeah, so my dad was, I suppose he came from a family where his father wasn't really a worker, and his mother was a really hard. She was Irish. She moved over here to work in being a nurse in London, and she was an extremely hard worker, and sort of brought the family up on that hard work was essential to pay the bills and keep things going forward. I think my dad felt extremely responsible to step in as the sort of father of the home, and I think that made him an extremely shrewd businessman, hard worker, and an extremely good value for money. So he was inevitable to just be, really working the grind. I don't necessarily think he is smart, but I don't think he works smart. I think he works too hard probably, and that's what he wanted to transfer over to me. So I've gone from the generation above, from being hard work, but trying to make sure that I'm a bit smarter with how I do it. So he was, yeah, working on construction sites. His standard gig was buy a bungalow. We live in really high value areas near Oxfordshire. So, you know, back in the, you know, he bought his first house for 17,000, sold it for 100,000 more, did all the work himself, and progressively went up the ladder to, you know, build bigger and better houses. And actually, he retired from his plant hire company, the service-based company, and I'd argue he's probably made more value in the family housing portfolio that he had built, and he never really owned more than one house, so it was always buy it, refurbish it, live in it, sell it, next one, next one, next one. And
It's
yeah,
very
I
similar
was.
to my upbringing.
And throughout that, yeah, well, I was full on labouring. I've got a sister and a brother, but my brother was probably more targeted than my sister was. But we were both, you know, we've both worked on site. We've both knocked up concrete to build driveways, build walls, put fencing up. You got to earn your keep in our family, and it's certainly not a free ride. It's almost like you don't have a good relationship with my dad unless you're working hard and not dossing around. So that was always ingrained to us, and I think we're all hard workers, and we've taken that on, which is you know, a good thing to take on. And I think there's certain generations coming through being an employer now where that's missed, and there are people that are not willing to work for it, but that might be another topic another day. But yeah, from day one, it's I always wanted to be the hardest worker in the room, and I always made sure that I implemented that in anything that I did. I think that intelligence and the ability to learn in education is to some degree your personality and what you're born with. There's some people that are a lot more intelligent than others, and I knew that I actually wasn't that smart. I went to a school where I was pretty much bottom grades and everything. I was quite good at sport, but that was pretty much as far as it went. Being dyslexic, I focused a lot more of my time into like subjects like maths, art, drama, um, than the English literature, sciences. I just don't really like reading, so Audible was an absolute godsend for me. So I just took what I knew from my dad's work. I did want to excel and be as successful, hopefully more successful than him. And we always have a bit of a joke, that we're still in a bit of a race, but his clocks stop and mine's still running. And we do have that friendly banter now. Originally, it wasn't there. He was very hard nosed and very rude or blunt. But I'm thankful for that, because I don't accept anything to happen for me without my influence. So I take it upon myself to create that. But yeah, all the way through childhood and growing up, it's been work ethic first, before anything else. And you do get appreciation in our family if the work ethic's there, which is great, when you're putting it in, that is. So yeah, it's been installed from day one that you've got to be hardworking, whether you're smart or not.
Yeah, absolutely love that. It's very similar. My dad, very hardworking. Even now, he phones me if I've put a Facebook story up of me on the golf course on a Tuesday. He'd be like, "What are you doing? Why are you not at work?" And I'm like, "It's right, Dad. I've got a business. I've got people doing things, and it's very much like, what are you doing? That you should be cracking on now." And it's like you just said earlier. It's working harder, but also adding that working smarter. So with that great work ethic that you had installed into you, Jack, and moving on through once you left school and you started getting into property, did you then add in some more self development, learning about property? What was the next stage of it for you when you were getting into into the property development world?
Yeah, so I understood construction pretty well, because I've been on so many construction sites. So I'm talking the makeup of buildings, what insulation is, how it goes together. By the time I was getting into property as a business, I could pretty much plaster, paint, block lay, knock up gauges, do groundworks. I could do all of the manual stuff. I didn't understand much of the technical stuff. So planning, um, what sort of engineering goes into build certain buildings and why they're built that certain way. I just knew the delivery, so I knew everything from drawings to completion. And I didn't understand raising capital, buying assets, setting up companies, cash flowing companies. I didn't understand planning, design, spec, how to deliver something to sell it. A lot of the projects that you build out what the architect drew, whereas I now had to be leading that part of what's going to sell, get the architect to draw that, change that, tweak that. So redesign. Obviously, the construction came quite easy, but comically, I've actually now stepped away from that part in our business. That's run by my business partner on our team. and then the sales process. So there was all these areas outside of just digging ground, fix, final paint and furnishing that I didn't understand. So again, it sort of taps into the hard work and just getting around. I took out of the back of my sales role, I took a full-time project management job in West London. And the reason I did that is I had a nice pot saved up, and we had some successes with a couple of developments houses that I'd turned around beforehand. But the issue with that is there's always something to be getting on with. So I felt that I'd work on site from sort of 7 till 4. Then when I got back in at 4, I was ordering materials, working on, what the next day looks like, arranging labour, arranging the team, paying people. So I basically didn't have any time outside of that sort of when you're running your own project. So what I did is, I'm going to work for someone else for however long it takes for this particular project, which was a £7 million office refit in West London. And I worked 9 to 5, so to speak, with a commute either side. What that enabled me to do was to listen to audiobooks, read magazines in my spare time, attend events in the city and outside the city, in the evenings. And I averaged it was pretty crazy when I look back at it now, because I don't do this now. I was attending about 3 to 4 property events a week, as well as working sort of 60, 70 hours in that job. And the way I learn, as mentioned, I'm not really a textbook kind of guy. I learn off other people, which hugely benefits me, because you're sort of building relationships as you're learning. But I hugely love learning off others. So I joined boardroom groups. We started at Progressive Property, so I had a mentor there. I had a mentor outside of Progressive Property who was completely nothing to do with any educational platform, just a really aspirational guy. I learned off other people that I met for coffees, met for lunch, brought them to the site that I was working on, picked their brains. And I was sort of figuring out a plan of where I wanted to go and what I wanted to do. And by the end of that project, I'd actually met Ben from all of this networking 3 or 4 nights out a week. And obviously working pretty heavily on weekends, building up a business plan, a strategy, and really working hard on that. So I really hugely used the time that I was working in that space to just excel in knowing a bit of an end game for me. You'll laugh, I also did other things that year, like selling materials, because there was a lot of surplus on site. I also sold just the trader in me, that when I was working on that site, there was 170 tradesmen on site every day. It was a huge office building, and I was buying steel toe cap Chelsea boots from China and selling them to the staff, because as a legal requirement, we had to have spare shoes for from a health and safety perspective, but they were really ugly, like black ankle high boots. And I went and bought like a nice product that I knew. I bought in at like £16 a unit, and I'd sell to the trades at £50 a unit. So I was also running a bit of a trade gig while I was there as well. But that's how really my property journey went, from being in sales, working for someone else as a project and site manager. It's obviously relative, so I understood a lot. I understood a bit more about office fit out, makeup, managing professionals, managing the M&E consultant, managing the architect. And then by the time I'd left there, I then was really fortunate enough to meet Ben. That's when we started looking at projects together. We set up EP40, and then started really figuring out what we wanted to do as a company. And every single 6 months, it completely changes and gets refined. We've learned so much in the last 5 years. It's actually insane. We've bought 59 projects since then, and the amount you learn on each individual scheme is just enough to just tweak it, learn, move on, do a bit better next time. So we're still very activity led. My view is I might not be the smartest developer or have the biggest track record, because in our generation in property development, we're competing with 30, 40, 50-year-old companies. But we certainly are active, and we're learning every project that we go forward.
Yeah. So in true fail forward fashion,
Exactly.
it's picking up all the little bits and working out, what can we do and improve next time, right?
Exactly that. And we started small and we're getting bigger, but we're likely to have made all the mistakes that we would on those schemes. So that's how we're comfortable to scale the company as we are.
Yeah, absolutely love that self-awareness, because I think my biggest failure was not seeing all the looking at every single thing we did, and it compounded. Lots of little failures compounded into one big failure, people always say to me, well, how did you fail, Henry? And I was like, well, there's lots of little ones. So to have the self-awareness, Jack, to be looking at everything and going, right, okay, so what can we do? What can we do? Yep, that was great. Yeah, we did make money on that project, but what could we do to better next time? What were the break points? What the most difficult points? Going back to what you just said as well, there's so many golden nuggets in there. You've got mentors. You need to get one mentor. You had a mentor in Progressive. You had another mentor, which is amazing. And the networking. So many people, because now I mentor people in property as well for Progressive on service accommodation. People say, one of the first things I say to people, are you going to networking? People say, no. I'm like, go to networking, meet people, get in amongst different people. Because one thing I learned with property, slightly different to tree surgery, and it's opening up now, but people are so much more open to talk and share information because there's so much opportunity in property. There was so much more crossover and people helping each other. How did you find doing all that networking sort of four times a week?
Yeah, you get some events that you've traveled into London and back from London and you didn't really get much value from it, and someone's doing a talk on something that might not be relevant. But I'm a massive believer in delayed gratification. You can't value every day on its merits because you never know what that might bring you in 6, 10, 12 months time. But, even longer than that. We've had people that I met in, one of my original boardroom groups that I was in 6 years ago. I'm actually partnered now in the social business with one of the people that attended it. And it's just that consistent, them getting to know me getting to know them. And eventually 7 years on later, 6.5 years on later, we're partnering on a development together. And it's that delayed gratification that you can't really value today. So I was just happy to be out and meeting people that were doing different things. I love hearing about other people's mistakes, successes. I love going to talks and hearing about other people's businesses. I've been to a few talks recently about companies that have gone into liquidation. I've heard about companies that have been a real success, and me to try and piecemeal what I can take from both of those businesses, I find really exciting. I'm a bit of a problem solver, so I also like helping others. It's quite exciting when you're really not scaling a development company, like when I spent the sort of 18 months really getting out there and being in front of people. I was trying to solve problems in other people's businesses before ours was really off the ground, and it was sort of, I suppose, sense checking me and hearing their views on my delivery on that. And there's never a perfect way of running a business, because I think that's physically impossible. There's always problems, whether you haven't got enough cash flow to grow, or you need some capital to grow, or whether the right team is difficult to hire, or whatever it may be. But what you can do, I have a massive mantra, is only worry about the things that you can control. Everything that you can't control shouldn't be a concern for you. So the market, but you can de-risk deals, so that to work on what you can control. And for me at that moment in time, I could control where I was, who I was surrounding myself with, and if I wasn't in those rooms, I'd probably be listening to, books or podcasts anyway. So it was for me just to be a bit of a sponge for a few years and really learn. I probably learned more in that 18-month period than I did from the ages of 5 to 21 in education. So I was really keen to just I suppose meet people from a first point, but also just get an understanding of what this industry is and what we're learning about. A lot of people actually say to me, because I'm 31, they say, a lot for someone that's 31 and running development companies. But what I always say back is, I said, if you've worked 100-hour weeks for the last 10 years, you've technically done 20 years worth of work condensed into 10 years. So it's just because I've been really active.
Yeah, love that. Absolutely love that. And the fact that you've been active and helping people as well is fantastic, because being able to give and receive at the same time is massive. So yeah, I love your self-awareness on that. So let's go back, because you mentioned you had a couple of failed businesses in the way of a gym and a food prep company. So tell me about that, and what happened with those and what you learned from those.
Yeah, they were two huge learning curves. So the meal prep company I was fundamentally in the office that I was in. I was cooking meals. I'm into fitness, health and fitness, and the most important thing about health and fitness is actually the nutrition. I think the gym's great, and it actually, for me, from a mental perspective, it sort of levels me out and gives me a bit of a breather from the day to day, and it's really the only time that I switch off. But the nutrition was a really key thing for me. So I would I was the only person in the whole company of 130, 40 people that would bring in my own food that I've cooked and I've not bought from a shop in the centre of Reading, because the office was based in Reading. And first off, get your head around that, like pre-prepping food that no one else was doing it. So I was bringing in food for myself, and it would be like lean mince curries with sweet potato or chicken and broccoli and rice or whatever it may be. And I would batch cook on a Sunday night and eat Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then I'd batch cook Wednesday and eat Thursday, Friday, and then if there's any left over at the weekends. My line manager, you could say at the time in sales, was a ex-semi-professional rower, quite a tall guy, cared about his health and fitness, was now a keen cyclist. And he just sort of said to me one day, can you just cook me what you eat and I'll pay you a fiver or whatever? And I was like, yeah, okay. So it then scaled from one person doing it to 5 people doing it, to 10 people doing it, to 20 people doing it, to the directors doing it. And it just sort of grew. And you'll laugh. At the time, because I was such a frugal individual, I had a 1970s 90cc Honda Cub moped that I would literally be like a pizza boy. I would go from work. I would normally work from about 8 a.m. to 9 p.m. I'd then go to the shops on the way home. I'd then drive home and I'd cook every night, because the demand got so big for me supplying this. And you've got to remember, I'm only cooking at home, putting everything on the back box in my moped and then taking it into the work fridge, where I couldn't fill it with 100 meals to supply the week. So I had to do batch cooking every night. And I did that solid for probably about 14, 15 months. And while I was doing that, I always had aspirations to open a gym. I thought these two businesses are extremely complementary. If I could sell my meals in the gym as well as have a gym and a gym, a routine gym membership sort of style, it would be great. So as I was sort of getting pretty fed up or not happy with my sales role, and I was actually making substantial cash from the meal prep company, another opportunity threw itself my way, similar to the meal prep, where it sort of appeared. I live in Henley-on-Thames, and there was a gym called LA Fitness, which was bought out by Pure Gym, quite a famous franchise. And LA Fitness in Henley's like a higher tier, higher value area. It's actually top rated in the top 10 most affluent towns and cities in the UK. The sort of budget gym model didn't really work, and it was a bit of a loss leader for that portfolio. So when Pure Gym bought out LA Fitness, they actually decided to shut down LA Fitness in Henley. And I sort of caught through the grapevine of my contacts that there was 2,000 members there that didn't have a gym to go to. And it didn't take much of a scientist to work out that there wasn't actually capacity at the existing gym offering in Henley. So I knew there was a supply and demand fault in Henley-on-Thames. I also knew that my dad owned a commercial gym, a commercial unit, which was 3,500 square foot. And I'm thinking to myself, I've got demand here, I've got space here. I sort of know what fitness needs and is, because I've been going to the gym for in excess of 10 years. So this is quite a good business opportunity. So over the course of the last 3 months of my sales job, I was actually building a business plan and working on setting up my own gym. I got change of use planning permission on my dad's unit. I spec'd out all of the design of the interior of the unit, what the fit out cost would do. I had 3 suppliers that I tendered out to. So obviously huge learning curve. So business plan together, kit specking, space planning, tendering out for the work. I had actually agreed a financial agreement with a sister company to fund the kit as well. So I built this business plan, and I suppose this is when the sort of cracks started to come between enthusiasm and experience, or you could phrase it enthusiasm and delivery, which then obviously creates experience. I hit a few roadblocks. So my accountant basically shot down my business plan, said my numbers weren't good enough and that I hadn't thought about a lot of factors. And this was one big learning curve for me. Being 22, 23 years old, I just took his word. He's a 50-year-old accountant. And the reason that he's an accountant is because he's not a business owner. Now I look back on it, I actually think that was really bad advice. He could have worked with me with what he knew to de-risk my scheme. But I've now learned he was the wrong person for me to be bouncing ideas off. And his personality type is not to take risks. And that was actually one of the first catalysts that meant that I didn't want to then pursue that position, because someone that's senior, supposed to be more experienced than me, and it could be lack of confidence, lack of age, lack of years, whatever it may be. It knocked me back, and I was like, maybe this isn't going to work, and it's a big risk. I'm quitting my job. I'm taking a massive overhead of financial burden. It might not work. And that was the first sort of someone taking the sales out my wing, my taking the wind out of my sales experience. So from then, I was a bit lost, and I thought to myself, how can I conclude this? I want to know if it's going ahead or not, and how do I get to that point? And so what I started to do was meeting other gym owners that aren't based in Henley-on-Thames, that I could hopefully rely on some of their expertise or experience or previous experiences. And I was really fortunate enough to meet a local guy who grew up near Henley, but he actually set up his first gym in Reading. He then set up a bigger gym in Reading, and now he's got about 10 or so branches across the south of the UK, all massive gyms. I'm talking 3,000 to 5,000 members, and he's really successful out of it. He came to view the space, and he gave me a lot of advice that I wouldn't have known unless you've been in business for 10, 15 years in that space. He said, the space is too small. He said, you'll make it work if you just want to be a manager on a good rate. But if you want to scale this and step out of it, it needs to be bigger. He was like, you're not going to make business money out of this. You're going to make management money, in which case you might as well go and be a manager at a gym. He actually said to me, come and be a manager at one of my gyms. So he taught me, he taught me a lot. So that was one really positive spin of building he actually really liked my business plan. He was very impressed by it, and he thought my numbers were pretty on par. So it's all about sort of meeting and finding out what's going on. And I think you can learn a hell of a lot of years of grey hairs off others. And that's really what I was reliant on. I saw in other investment. I learned how to raise capital against a business plan and things like that. So through all of this process of only a few months, I was sort of learning and growing and I suppose succeeding in understanding of business and what it means, but also failing in that particular role. Anyway, in short, the business was ready to run. I could have signed on the dotted line. I needed a guarantor for my dad because I was producing a menial income, and when that business was kicking off, I would have then lost that income. So that the financial lender wanted some sort of cross guarantees, and at which point my dad said to me, he actually basically said, I'm not backing you on this. So that was also a bit of a big learning curve for me to have someone that, know, likes and trusts me, to not actually believe in the model. And when he said that, he said, if this was a property or if this was a plot of land or if this was in development, I'd back you, but it's not. So I'm not. So what I learned from that and what I actually managed to do, being the person that I am, I actually packaged up all the work that I had done on this scheme and traded it on to someone else that did have the confidence and the backing and the scheme. So they went on and run that gym. And, I didn't necessarily become really successfully financially out of it, but the amount of knowledge and experience that I took from that, I managed to trade it on and see that then actually grow to failure, because the person that took it on, believe it or not, was an accountant, not the accountant I was referring to, but another one. I just knew that I needed to take my personality traits, my strengths, start something that I believe I can finish and prove. Once I've got that model proven, then go to rounds of investment, partnership, contacts, whatever it may be. And maybe one day my dad might back me. So that was a huge failure, success, learning curve, something that I took forward with me and drove on. And it was then I'd actually had quit my job, and I was sort of free reign from all of that being dusted away. I've got some funny stories actually where I was in my office in my sales role in Reading, and I'd say I'm just going to the loo, and I literally run downstairs, jump on my moped, drive to Henley, which is about a 15-minute ride, do a meeting with someone, and then ride back and go back up into the office, which is probably against my contract, but I don't think they'll care now because they're very supportive of what I've done since I've left the company. But yeah, so that was, I personally felt like a failure a few times in that process of setting that up and trying to grow that business. But it's really, I think unless it really hurts, you don't learn as much. And I think that's been a really key learning curve for me. And if you're not exposed to failure, you're going to make mistakes later down the line. And to be a successful company, people don't want to see, rookie mistakes being casted over in the first part. So I'm very open-minded in that respect. So I was hugely grateful for that venture, which didn't really work out but as well for me as I'd like to hope it. Maybe one day I'll be a gym owner again. Who knows? Hopefully in my own building. My wife actually runs gyms and meal prep companies since we've met, but that's in Southern California, so it's a little bit different. But I do actually have a position in that business as well, so I get to see exciting things like that go on. I help with most of the financial management and some areas of the business, but yeah, maybe fitness one day, but for me, I'm sticking to what I know and building an ecosystem within construction and property.
Yeah, I love that. Absolutely love that. It sounds like it's your destiny to have maybe a few gyms in the UK that you own the buildings on as well, because then you get the asset and you get the business, right? So how did it make you feel in the sense of when you sort of had that failure, dad didn't back you? How did that make you feel? Do you think it made you more driven?
100%. Yeah, I'm 100% believe that. I weirdly, I don't feel accepted until stuff starts getting to work, and it appears like it's working from under the bonnet, the numbers and financially, but also aesthetically. So I always focus on the numbers first, but I also obviously want to for people to see that it's a success. And I suppose everyone in that, whatever their passion is, whether it's a nurse working for the NHS or whether it's a business owner like us, everyone has their passion for drive, and mine is business success. And it really did drive me, and it was a huge knockback. But what it also did was I worked in sales, and in sales, the first thing they ask you in an interview is explain to me how you're resilient. When I joined that sales company, I thought I was a very resilient person. I was very resilient in sport. I was resilient in education, being dyslexic and overcoming it, getting a good degree. But what does resilience mean? I suppose every year in your life it changes, and it might be resilience to different things, but at that moment in time I was naive, growing a business plan or something that I hadn't delivered for. Would I back myself? Who knows? If I had it spare, probably, but if it was my only ticket, no. So the drive and the resilience off the back of that is what now helps me in my current day really keep driving forward when there is a no, when there is someone's put a barrier in front of you, when a planning officer has rejected a planning application that you thought was absolutely sailing through, when one of your employees decides to hand their notice in, when an investor pulls out the week before you're due to complete on a deal and you need to find 800 grand in 10 days. Like, that resilience can't be built off anything other than experience. So it gave me huge drive, and it still is there. I feel that drive is better than sleep. Drive is better than any work ethic. It keeps you getting up each morning and just banging that drum and just making sure that everything's ticking along, moving forward and growing and as efficient as it can be. So I love the word drive. I think that's the only thing that you really can control, your own drive and everything that you do daily. And I've been a massive advocate from sort of the work ethic topic we touched on earlier today. But also off the back of that sort of naive, my dad actually said to me, it was probably about 2 or 3 years after he felt he had let me down. And he sort of said, he said in his own words, the way that panned out, he said that way that business venture panned out for you is he felt like he gave me a balloon, I blew it up, and as soon as it was that size, he popped it. And that was I suppose, an example of, someone's self-motivation or self-belief, and it was. But fortunately, you can hustle and you can go and buy more balloons and blow up 3 at a time next time. So when your dad comes and pops one, or the market pops one, or a finance backing pops one, you still got 2 left, and that's massively what I took away from that.
Yeah, absolutely love that, and you're right. Like, drive, when I lost it all, and my drive just went up massively because I wanted to achieve and be successful. Similar driver, I want to be successful in business. I want the numbers to work, and now I've created multiple businesses and, like you say, multiple balloons, not relying on one revenue stream. And people often say to me, why have you gone and done this, and why have you gone and that? I'm like, because I don't know what could happen tomorrow. The reason my business failed in the first place was me. But next there could be something else that comes along and pops my balloon. So yeah, you know what, Jack, this has been brilliant today. There's been so many golden nuggets of information. It's been fantastic. So what would you say your sort of definition of failure is, and failing forward?
So I first off, and you've probably talked about this a lot on your podcast before, I think failure shouldn't be acknowledged as a negative thing. You like quite frequently, I mean, being in sales, it helps to sort of concede to failure and enjoy it. But quite frequently, I think to myself, if, you know, as an example, every single my negotiation, I'm giving away my negotiation tactic here now to everyone. If you're buying something for £1,500 and you say to them, I offer you £1,000, and they go, I can't accept that, and you say, how close can you get? You're not going to get a better deal than you originally were anyway. So what have you got to lose? If you fail budging them from even a penny from 1,500 quid, you've still got the same price that you were going to pay anyway. So first off, with failure, what have you got to lose? Asking the question, trying to challenge it, giving it a go. You're only going to learn from it, and you're only going to potentially get a better prospect or better moving forward out of it. So first off, I always think, what have you got to lose to try something and be open to failing at it and learning from that failure. Another definition of failure is, I feel that failure defines success. So without the failure, you won't know what the success is, or you'll never get there. I've had that a lot from products. You would actually laugh if you went and opened up our storage that's got all the products that I've bought and I haven't sold. There's probably a significant amount worth of stock, you know, hundreds of pounds worth of stock, but that box of stuff that didn't work doesn't mean to me that I failed as a person and as a trader and as an eBayer. That to me is an example of how I had to test different things in the market, see where the demand is, and sell other stuff. You know, I've sold all the stock elsewhere that's paid for that and more. So it's not necessarily the be all and end all. The failure is step one. Failure again is step two, and eventually you get to the top of the steps and you're like, okay, I've got a product or I've got a business that works. So don't necessarily take it as the be all and end all. We've all seen the image of the guy walking away from digging at the end of his tunnel when he only needed one more strike to get to the gold, and that's life, that's business, and it's got to be part of it. So it's not the be all and end all is another defined definition for me. And then the last one, which is touching on activity again, is if you are super active, you're going to have a lot more failures than someone that's not. So there's a phrase that the harder you work, the luckier you get. I think that one's a bit cringy, but to some degree, the pretense works. That it's quite frequent that, you know, some people have said to me, we discussed just before we came on the call, we've won 2 awards in the last sort of 10 days, 2 weeks. And that didn't come from the last 2 weeks. That came from years of work, years of failure. Last year, and the reason you reached out to me was because of my post. We submitted our development, which was 7 offices and 7 flats for development of the year last year. We came runner-up. We submitted a new scheme this year. That was a failure last year. We didn't win. Okay, second is commendable, but in you know my sporting arena, second is last. And we changed our business. We changed our business model. We looked at different stock. We improved our team. We worked heavily on planning. We worked heavily on delivery. And as a result of that failure, we've now put a deal forward which has won 2 awards, one in the same category and another in a different sector of award winning. So that just defines that you've got to be active. You've got to be refining the process. You've got to be failing to be a better business. And the more failures you do, the better you will look. But what happens behind scenes, there's continuous failures. We have failures every day in the company. It's actually really difficult to celebrate the wins because every day that something goes right, there's probably more things that have gone wrong. And that's just the line of our work and what we've got to deal with, and just keep focusing on the sort of 5-10 year plan. Make sure you know day to day what you've got to do to get there. Don't take the failures personally. Take them holistically and learn from them. Is what I can add on failure.
Absolutely love that. Like that's and more, so many golden nuggets there. It's like what people say about the iceberg effect. Like people would probably see you now, stood on that stage, you know, taking it, going, oh wow, you know, that guy's mega successful. See Jack and your partner and go, oh look, you know, their success, they've skyrocketed, but they don't see what's underneath all of those failures. And that's, I think, the most important thing, and what I'm trying to do with this podcast is get people to understand that, and that it's okay to fail. Because certainly when I failed, Massively. As I say, it was compound of lots of little failures that I didn't pick up on. But also the negative stigma around failure was huge. And even if you look it up in the English dictionary, you look up failure and you read out failure, and it's nothing but just negative, negative. And, you know, trying to flip it on its head, and everything you've just said is absolutely bang on. One thing I wanted to go back to, which you said quite early, is about being your own bottleneck in your business. And I certainly learned that. And it's trying to show other people to build a team and not be the sole point, because when you're the sole center point of a business, you are the break point. I used to be the break point of my tree surgery business. And it's something Kevin McDonald says at Progressive Property. He was like, I got a letting agent, but I don't have a desk in my letting agent. And I was like, how come? And he was like, because then I don't have to understand all the systems and everything. I've got built a team that can go and do that for me, and I'm not the center point of it, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, completely agree. And I'm quite a big believer in the best team. And I used to play rugby. The best team play off their strengths, right? So someone that doesn't know rugby knows that the big chubby guys that have got a low centre of gravity, great work ethic, like getting their head down, go at the front of the scrum. And I used to play this position, so I can say that. And the pretty boys are out the back throwing the balls wide and running around people. And what I'm trying to get at with that, and Will Greenwood, the lock in the Rugby World Cup, has actually written a book on this, of how sport can be relative to business, is you wouldn't win a World Cup if you picked up all the players and moved positions. Why? Because they're good in some areas and bad in some areas. So when you're in business and when you're building a team and when you're building a business and you don't want to be the bottleneck of that, it's all about understanding people's strengths, hiring the people for the requirement, but also making sure they're playing to their strengths. So my strengths in our business, and we easily allocate it, is in property, you have acquisitions, funding, structuring, design, delivery, and sales. I don't get involved in the design, delivery, and sales. All of that is Ben's gig, and then our team that are managed by Ben. Everything acquisition, funding, and structuring is my skill set. I'm good at closing deals. I'm good at sales. I'm good with numbers, and I understand the legal process of structuring a purchase, whether that be complicated or simplified. So I work off those skill sets, and it is a mantra of when you play off your strengths, not only do you enjoy it, not only are you good at it, so you're getting the best result for the business, but also the scalability is huge. It's not, when we set up the company and it was just Ben and I didn't feel like we were going to grow the business twice as quickly because there was two of us. I felt like we were going to grow the business 10 times as quickly because he's doing all the things I'm bad at, and I'm doing all the things he's bad at. So I think that metric is really powerful in business, and we learned that early on because our personalities did gel that way. We sort of spotted those. You know, Ben said to me in literally like month one, "You should be acquisitions director," and I was a bit like, "How has he worked that out?" I've delivered in construction. I've project managed big projects like he has, but now it makes sense. And maybe that's the age he's got on me. He could spot that from an earlier date. So we've tried to factor that and encompass that into our business so that everyone's playing off their strengths. And that is completely true. You know, someone that's in admin might not be good at sales. Someone that's, for an example, surveying might not be good at business development. Like, you don't have to be good at everything. And it's really key that you analyze where your role is. And the owner of Gymshark actually had this sort of self-check moment as well when he was scaling, you know, up to £1 billion company, and he was CEO. It was way above his pay grade, and he then he delegated himself down to marketing director, and since then the business has gone skyrocket. And it's that self-awareness and putting the ego aside that really takes businesses to the next level, and allowing other people to be better than you at something is really common in a service-based business. When it goes from one director doing the service themselves. So for an example, let's use Ben's architectural practice as an example. Ben was drawing up architectural drawings and he built a business through himself and he grew the team. And a lot of clients were coming to him and going, "I want you to do the work." And he's actually going, "Well, I'm actually so out of touch with it now. I'm running the business. I could give you business advice of how to scale a business, but I can't give you architectural advice because I'm out of it. There's a lot of other people that are doing it day in, day out, more qualified, more skilled, and you're better placed with them." And that's quite common when businesses scale. So I suppose I can sort of tell from meeting you, and I do remember meeting you at Progressive Property that time. I think you do have good self-awareness, and I think that's really, really key to growing a team and growing a business, and also maximizing on what your team can do for you and giving them responsibilities. You know, I'm it's really difficult for someone that's not lazy to delegate correctly, if that makes sense. And I struggled with that because I thought it's quicker if I do it myself. I'm probably better at it anyway. But as soon as you start getting in the rhythm of actually offloading the work in areas where other people are way better than you, it becomes really powerful, because then you can focus on your strengths too, which help the business.
Yeah, 100%. And you're right, because trying to do that, it's that age old saying, isn't it? I'll do it myself because it could be quicker and I'll be better at it. But actually, there's so many people at doing better things. Again, I felt I'm similar to you. I wasn't very good at school, and I'm not very good with certain things. And now I've got a team that do things a lot quicker. But one thing I realised, and actually I didn't know that about the Gymshark guy, but that makes total sense, because when my failure happened, my business skyrocketed, and my knowledge and self-development I didn't do much of. So I didn't actually follow the trajectory of my business, as you say, like when you're talking earlier, it's like what Rob Moore says, new level, new devil. You know, the more your business grows, and to have that self-awareness that the Gymshark guy went, actually, I'm going to put a CEO in charge because he's going to do it a lot better. That's amazing. And, you know, having that self-awareness, building a team, and you and your partner understanding each other's strengths, and that's what the perfect JV is. I mean, you look at Rob and Mark; they've got their own strengths and weaknesses, and if you can work off that, then you know you've got a match made in heaven. So yeah, it's been brilliant today. I've loved hearing your failures, I've loved hearing your successes, I've loved hearing your story, and there's been so much knowledge here for my listeners. So just if people wanted to reach out and connect with you, where's the best place to do that?
Of course, thank you, and thank you for having me on. I'm on all socials, so LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook. Just Jack Jiggens, surname spelled Jiggens. You can search up any of our companies. XP Properties, a development company. XP Surveys, we do measured building and topographical surveys for any property people out there. We're the only business in that industry that has an online quotation tool for a measured building survey or topographical survey. And then Central Suites is our property management and HMO business in Oxfordshire. But yeah, reach out, happy to connect, help in any ways I can. And if anyone's got any more detailed questions on anything we've discussed, happy to help.
Brilliant. Awesome. Thanks so much for coming on, Jack.
Thanks, Henry.